Welcome to a story where survival is not fought with weapons, but with resonance. When Earth's first human emissary, Daniel Carter, arrives on the alien capital of Chromos, he expects diplomacy, not collapse. But when the Empress's biological energy begins to fail, entire star systems descend into chaos. Assassination attempts, riots, and grid failures follow. To prevent galactic war, Daniel must risk becoming part of the very system he was sent to negotiate with. Stay with us as harmony, power, and identity collide in a battle for trillions of lives. The sky over Chromos ruptured without warning. Daniel Carter's shuttle screamed as lavender lightning tore across its hull, shredding stabilizers in a single violent surge. Warning lights strobed red, artificial gravity flickered, then inverted. For half a second he was weightless, then slammed back into the harness as the craft spun nose down toward a forest of crystalline towers. Autopilot offline. The onboard AI rasped before dissolving into static. Radiation levels spiked beyond predicted thresholds. The energy storm was not meteorological. It pulsed in waves, rhythmic, deliberate. Daniel's breath shortened. He forced his hand steady across the manual controls. Diplomat or not, survival came first. He cut main thrusters, diverted emergency power to attitude jets, and angled toward a hovering transit platform drifting between spires. The hull buckled. Exterior plating peeled away like paper. Altitude collapsed. Impact alarm held. The shuttle hit hard, skidding across the luminous surface in a shower of sparks. Metal screamed against crystal. The nose crumpled. Fire licked along ruptured conduits. Then silence. Daniel hung suspended in smoke and flickering emergency light, listening to his own heartbeat pound louder than the dying engines. He was alive. Chromos was not stable. Smoke thickened inside the shattered cockpit as internal seals failed one by one. Daniel forced himself to move. Heat climbed through the floor plating. The air tasted metallic, laced with ionized residue. He slapped the emergency release and kicked the hatch open just as flames curled along a ruptured conduit behind him. Warm air rushed in. Not smoke, not vacuum. Air, dense, perfumed, breathable. He dragged himself onto the crystalline platform. The surface vibrated faintly beneath his palms, as if alive. Above him, Chromos stretched upward in impossible geometry. Towers bending against gravity. Bridges suspended in nothing. Energy currents arcing between structures like silent lightning. Drones descended instantly. Spherical machines projecting containment fields over the burning wreckage. The fire died mid-flicker, extinguished by invisible force. A tall figure approached through the dispersing haze. 4 arms, pearlescent skin refracting the fading stormlight. Kaylor. His voice resonated through a translation field. You survived. Daniel rolled onto his back, drawing slow breaths. The storm clouds were already thinning. The violent atmospheric surges that had nearly torn him apart were stabilizing. Too quickly. He felt it then. The sky's turbulence had rhythm, not weather, a pulse. Daniel barely had time to decontaminate before Kaylor escorted him through corridors carved from living crystal. The walls pulsed faintly, as if circulating light instead of blood. Outside the transparent panels, Chromos shimmered, still unstable. Microbursts of energy flickered along distant towers. The storm has diminished, Kaylor said, though his tone carried unease. Her Majesty awaits. The throne chamber opened in a silent sweep of luminous mist. Tiered balconies were packed with alien dignitaries, their varied forms radiating tension. At the center, elevated above a field of harmonic light, stood Empress Liriana. She was motionless, but the air around her vibrated, Her sapphire skin glowed unevenly. Faint surges racing across luminous patterns etched along her arms and throat. Each pulse rippled outward through the chamber, distorting light itself. Daniel stepped forward, boots echoing against the crystalline floor. He felt pressure building behind his eyes, a low-frequency hum resonating in his bones. Liriana's gaze locked onto him. The tremors eased for 3 heartbeats. The chamber steadied. Then the harmonic field flickered again, brief, unstable. Daniel understood with sudden clarity. The storm above Chromos had not been random. It had been her. The chamber sealed behind him with a soft, crystalline hiss. The balconies dimmed. Only Liriana and Daniel remained within the central harmonic field. "You felt it?" she said. Not a question. Daniel nodded. Pulse still uneven. "The storm was synchronized to you." Liriana descended from the dais. With each step, the air pressure shifted subtly. The patterns across her skin flared brighter, then faltered. "Chromid physiology evolved alongside our civilization," she said, extending a hand toward the floor. The crystal beneath them dissolved into a living projection. Galactic maps unfolded in luminous layers. Star systems pulsed in varying intensities. Some glowed steady, others flickered violently. "When my internal resonance stabilizes," she continued, "these systems harmonize, trade flows, conflicts diminish, biological stress markers fall." She paused. Several outer systems flashed crimson. "When it destabilizes," the projection zoomed inward. Planetary riots, fleet mobilizations, resource collapses, energy grids fracturing. Daniel exhaled slowly. "You're not just a ruler." "No," Liriana replied, voice steady despite the tremor beneath it. "I am infrastructure." The projection faded. The crystal floor solidified again. Her glow dimmed a fraction. "For cycles," she said quietly. "I have been failing." Liriana extended her arm again, and the chamber dissolved into a 3-dimensional cascade of data. Entire star clusters hovered around them like burning embers suspended in darkness. Streams of energy flowed between worlds in luminous threads, some steady, others trembling on the edge of collapse. Daniel stepped closer, instinctively reaching toward one unstable node. The moment his fingers passed through the projection, the image shifted. A planetary feed filled the space, armored transports rolling through shattered streets, civilians scattering as energy weapons flared. "Outer Rim Sector 9, Liriana said. Stability index dropped 17% in one rotation. Another system flickered. Naval fleets converged near a resource corridor. Atmospheric shields faltered. Every fluctuation in my resonance magnifies their fears," she continued. "Our biology amplifies emotion across neural strata. Anxiety spreads. Aggression follows." Daniel felt the scale of it pressing down. Billions of lives linked to the rhythm of one being's internal state. "You carry all of that alone?" he asked quietly. "For generations," she replied. The glow beneath her skin thinned momentarily. "When I weaken, they sense it. Panic becomes policy." The projections dimmed. Silence lingered. "Trillions depend on whether I remain whole," she said. The chamber darkened until only Liriana's bioluminescent patterns remained visible. Faint pulses in the crystalline gloom. Daniel felt the harmonic hum again, lower now, strained. "You arrived during collapse," she said. "Your shuttle entered our atmosphere at the exact frequency of my destabilization." Daniel's jaw tightened. "You're suggesting my presence interrupted it." "I'm stating it." She stepped closer. The air thickened with a subtle, intoxicating warmth. Not scent alone. Pressure. Vibration. A current brushing against his skin. His implant monitors flickered, registering anomalous biofeedback spikes. Chromid biology adapts through novelty. Liriana continued. Across millennia, I have harmonized with every allied species. Their resonance patterns are known, predictable. She held his gaze. You are not. Daniel felt the weight of it settle like gravity. You want me to act as a stabilizer. I want you to survive with us, she said softly. Our connection may restore balance. He exhaled slowly, and if it fails, her glow dimmed another degree. Then the outer systems ignite. The Empire fractures. Earth enters a war it cannot comprehend. Silence expanded between them. The request was not diplomatic. It was existential. Daniel stood alone in the guest chamber assigned to him, staring at the fractured reflection in the living crystal wall. The room adjusted its temperature automatically, mimicking Earth's atmospheric comfort. But his pulse refused to settle. Outside, Chromos shimmered under artificial dusk, its towers linked by trembling arcs of energy. He replayed Liriana's words: novelty, resonance, survival. This was not the mission he had trained for. He was sent to negotiate treaties, establish trade corridors, prevent misunderstandings, not to become a biological component in a foreign empire's infrastructure. His wrist implant chimed softly. Earth's diplomatic channel flickered weakly through interference. Signal latency was extreme. Communication could collapse entirely if instability increased. If he refused, the Empire might fracture, and Earth would face the fallout of a galactic war. If he accepted, he risked surrendering more than autonomy. He would become entangled in their system, perhaps permanently altered. Daniel pressed his palm against the crystal surface. The wall responded with a faint harmonic echo, as if sensing his internal rhythm. He understood then that this decision was not about diplomacy. It was about identity. Survival demanded alignment, but alignment demanded change. The doors parted without sound, revealing a cavern of living crystal suspended above a void of shifting light. The chamber of resonance was not architecture, it was organism. Walls flexed faintly, transmitting low-frequency vibrations through the floor. Liriana stood at the center, bioluminescent patterns dim but steady. This is where the harmonic field is born, she said. Daniel stepped inside. Instantly, his implant flared warnings: neural interference, elevated electromagnetic flux, unstable atmospheric ionization. The chamber responded to his presence, subtle ripples cascading outward from his boots. Conduits of light unfurled from the ceiling, descending like translucent veins. They hovered near Liriana's shoulders, awaiting synchronization. Breathe with me, she instructed. He focused on rhythm. Inhale, exhale. The chamber amplified it. His heartbeat echoed back at him, distorted and multiplied. A surge struck without warning. The floor trembled. His vision fragmented into shards of color. Every nerve fired simultaneously as energy surged through the chamber and into his body. He dropped to one knee, teeth clenched, refusing to black out. Liriana steadied him with a touch. The surge stabilized, fading into a controlled pulse. For the first time, the harmonic field held. The chamber quieted, but the energy did not disappear. It condensed, coiling around them in tightening spirals. Daniel forced himself upright, breath ragged, nerves still vibrating from the surge. Liriana stepped closer, her glow intensifying by degrees. The first synchronization is always unstable, she said. Our biologies are testing one another. Daniel extended his hand before doubt could stop him. When their palms met, the reaction was immediate. Light erupted between their skin. Not heat, not flame, but a compressed spectrum of color bending inward. The floor beneath them fractured into luminous fractures. His implant overloaded, then recalibrated. His heartbeat locked onto hers. He felt it, her strain. the fatigue beneath her composure, the immense pressure of trillions layered into every pulse. The chamber roared. Energy arced outward in a controlled wave that rippled beyond the crystal walls. Liriana inhaled sharply. The patterns along her arms brightened, stabilizing into a coherent rhythm. Outside, distant towers ceased flickering. Daniel staggered but remained standing. This was no longer theory. They had made contact, not as ruler and envoy, but as intersecting systems, and the Empire had felt it. The second attempt was deliberate. No sudden contact, no uncontrolled surge. The chamber of resonance adjusted its frequency before Daniel even stepped forward. Anticipating instability, Liriana stood opposite him. Luminous patterns, now faintly coherent. "We refine the waveform," she said. "Not intensity. Precision." Daniel activated the neural dampeners in his wrist implant. Microfilaments extended across his skin, translating biological signals into measurable data streams. He focused on breath control, slowing his pulse until it steadied at baseline. "Begin," Liriana murmured. Their hands did not touch this time. They hovered centimeters apart. The chamber filled the space between them with a thin membrane of light. Daniel inhaled. Liriana mirrored him. The membrane vibrated, first chaotic, then gradually aligning. Their heart rhythms converged within narrow tolerance margins. The energy field expanded outward in concentric waves instead of explosive arcs. Across Chromos, diagnostic signals stabilized. Energy conduits brightened in sequence rather than flickering unpredictably. Daniel's muscles trembled under sustained current, but he held position. Sweat traced along his spine as electromagnetic pressure built around them. "Maintain alignment," Liriana instructed. He did, for the first time. Synchronization felt survivable, not overwhelming, controlled. The controlled waveform propagated outward like a silent tide. Data streams projected across the chamber walls as the living crystal translated their shared rhythm into measurable impact. System after system flickered from red to amber, from amber to steady blue. Daniel's implant fed him fragments of telemetry, atmospheric unrest decreasing, military mobilization rates slowing, civil disturbance indicators trending downward. The Empire's nervous system was responding. Liriana's breathing deepened. The glow beneath her skin strengthened, no longer erratic, but sustained. Each synchronized inhale sent a ripple through the harmonic grid, linking distant worlds. "Outer Rim Sector 9 has stabilized," Kaylor's voice echoed faintly through a remote channel. "Conflict de-escalation confirmed." Daniel felt the weight of that statement. Real lives. Real battles, pausing because two beings maintained precise resonance inside a crystalline chamber. The pressure did not vanish. It intensified in a different way. Sustained synchronization demanded endurance. His muscles trembled from holding steady neural alignment. One lapse could destabilize everything. "Do not chase strength," Liriana whispered. "Hold balance." He focused again on breath, on the thin membrane of light between them, on resisting the instinct to push harder. Outside, the sky over Chromos stopped flickering. For now, stability bred visibility. As the harmonic field strengthened, surveillance nodes across the capital reactivated at full spectrum. Energy fluctuations that once masked covert signals now cleared. The Empire could see itself again, and so could those who opposed change. Deep within a secondary command tier, Archon Kryth's crystalline facets refracted streams of newly stabilized data. Statistical models recalculated in silence. One anomaly persisted: the human variable. The Empire's biofield no longer depended solely on Liriana's singular output. A shared waveform was forming. General Vorth observed the same metrics from a military oversight grid. Fleet readiness indicators, dipped as unrest subsided. Power structures rooted in instability began eroding. Officers loyal to tradition exchanged encrypted signals. Back inside the chamber of resonance, Daniel felt none of the political tremors, only the sustained hum of energy flowing through him. Sweat cooled along his spine as he maintained alignment. Liriana sensed the shift beyond the walls. Her gaze lifted slightly, as if perceiving distant movement. "Stability threatens those who profit from fear," she said quietly. Daniel kept his breathing steady. Outside the palace, shadows reorganized. Harmony was rising. So was resistance. The breakthrough came without warning. Daniel felt it first as a tightening pressure behind his sternum, as if the chamber itself were inhaling through him. The membrane of light between his hand and Liriana's flared brighter than any prior synchronization cycle. "Hold steady," she said, but her voice carried awe instead of strain. Their heart rhythms locked completely. No delay. No interference. The chamber responded instantly. Conduits descending from the ceiling ignited in sequence, channeling the unified waveform outward. The surge did not explode. It expanded, like a tide rolling across a continent. Data cascaded across the living crystal walls. Outer system unrest, dropping in exponential curves. Fleet mobilizations, halting mid-command. Atmospheric riot markers collapsing to baseline. Beyond the palace, Chromos glowed. Towers once trembling with unstable arcs now pulsed in synchronized harmony. Daniel's implant overloaded briefly, then recalibrated to a new baseline frequency. His nervous system adapted instead of resisting. Liriana inhaled sharply, luminous patterns blazing in perfect coherence. The Empire's harmonic field surged beyond previous historical thresholds. For the first time in cycles, the capital did not flicker. It resonated, and the wave was still spreading. The data did not settle after the surge. It accelerated. Within the chamber of resonance, streams of harmonic telemetry restructured themselves in real time. Daniel's implant displayed unfamiliar markers, new resonance nodes forming beyond Liriana's primary biofield. "This was not predicted," Kaelor's distant voice transmitted, strained but controlled. "The harmonic grid is redistributing." Daniel felt it physically. The energy no longer flowed in a single direction from Liriana outward. It looped, cycling through him, refracting back into the chamber, amplifying in feedback arcs. Liriana's eyes widened. The luminous patterns beneath her skin shifted into configurations never recorded in Imperial archives. "The field is adapting," she said. Not with fear, but recognition. Across Chromos, secondary bioreceptors within the population began to register faint synchronization responses. The Empire's stability was no longer centralized in one body. It was dispersing. Archon Krith's models recalculated at exponential speed. A distributed harmonic architecture would eliminate biological singularity. It would also dismantle centuries of power dependency. Daniel's pulse steadied within the new waveform. He understood then. They were not merely restoring balance. They were rewriting it. And evolution never arrives quietly. The surge reverberated far beyond the chamber of resonance, in command galleries layered beneath the palace. Military overseers stared at rapidly updating projections. Stability indices climbed, but command authority metrics shifted in parallel. General Vorth watched the numbers harden into an undeniable conclusion. The harmonic field no longer radiated from a single sovereign source. Secondary resonance clusters were emerging across administrative sectors. Influence that once flowed exclusively through the Empress was diffusing. "This is contamination," one officer muttered. "No," Vorth replied, voice measured and cold. "It is redistribution." Redistribution meant decentralization. Decentralization meant erosion of ancient control structures that relied on dependency. Archon Krith's crystalline form refracted silent calculations. If this trajectory continues, it transmitted, the Empire will no longer require singular biological convergence. Vorth's gaze hardened. Then it must be interrupted. Back in the chamber, Daniel felt a faint tremor ripple through the harmonic grid. Not instability, but resistance. The waveform remained steady, yet pressure mounted from beyond. Liriana sensed it as well. Her glow intensified defensively. "Stability threatens those who fear change," she said quietly. Daniel did not break synchronization, but somewhere in the capital, countermeasures were already forming. The harmonic chamber dimmed abruptly. Daniel felt the shift before alarms registered. The membrane of light between him and Liriana flickered, then collapsed inward, like a dying star. "Energy diversion," Kaylor's voice cut through static. "Unauthorized containment protocol activated." The floor beneath Daniel liquefied into a translucent field. A containment shell snapped upward around him in a seamless dome of hardened light. Oxygen levels began dropping instantly. His implant flashed red warnings: atmospheric depletion, neural interference spike. Liriana's glow flared violently as she struck the barrier with raw resonance. The chamber trembled, but the shell held, siphoning harmonic output into sealed conduits. Daniel forced himself upright as pressure compressed his lungs. He located the weakest node, an oscillation at the base seam where the containment field met the crystalline floor. Not military, political, precision sabotage. He redirected power from his implant's dampeners into a short-range pulse emitter. The first discharge cracked the shell but failed. Oxygen dropped further. Black crept into the edges of his vision. He timed his breath to Liriana's external surge. On the second pulse, the seam fractured. The containment dome shattered in a burst of light and falling fragments. Daniel hit the floor hard. Alive. The chamber lights flickered again. But this time, the instability spread outward like cracking ice. Daniel pushed himself to his feet as warning glyphs cascaded across the living crystal walls. Harmonic conduits that had glowed steady now sputtered in irregular pulses. Primary grid interference detected. Kaylor transmitted. Multiple relay nodes compromised. Through a shifting projection, Daniel saw it. Energy arteries across Chromos dimming in staggered sequence. The distributed resonance they had built was being severed at key junctions. Liriana staggered as a siphon effect pulled at her biofield. The glow beneath her skin fractured into jagged patterns. She braced herself against the crystalline floor, forcing stability through sheer will. "Manual override is impossible," she said through clenched breath. "They've embedded counter-harmonic dampeners within the grid." Outside, towers that had stabilized hours before began flickering violently. Emergency transports launched. Civilian channels erupted in panic signals. Daniel felt the feedback hit his nervous system like electrical shock. The loop they had created was unraveling from the edges inward. He moved toward the nearest conduit node, hands already recalibrating his implant. "If they want disruption," he said, voice steady despite the tremor in his limbs, "then we counter-surge." The grid groaned under escalating strain. The counter-surge ignited before Daniel completed recalibration. A violent harmonic backlash tore through the chamber, flinging him across the crystalline floor. His implant shrieked with overload warnings as an external override seized control of the resonance field. "Isolation protocol engaged," an automated security voice announced, stripped of emotional modulation. A secondary barrier erupted, not around him this time, but around Liriana. A lattice of intersecting light collapsed inward, sealing her within a compressed harmonic cage. Her glow intensified as she fought to break it. But the dampeners absorbed each surge and redirected it into the failing grid. Daniel staggered upright, ears ringing. The air felt thinner. Energy displacement was siphoning atmospheric stability. Do not attempt direct breach, Kaylor transmitted urgently. The lattice is tied to the central grid. Forcing it will collapse the palace. Liriana's gaze found his through the shimmering barrier, for the first time since arrival. Fear flickered beneath her composure. The harmonic link between them thinned, then snapped. Daniel felt the loss like sudden vacuum. The shared rhythm hanashtidamat. Outside the chamber, the sky over Chromus fractured into unstable arcs of violet light once more. They had not merely attacked him. They had severed the bond. The rupture traveled faster than any fleet. Within seconds of the severed link, the harmonic grid convulsed across the Empire. Projection feeds flooded the chamber walls, outer colonies spiking into unrest, military channels overriding civil frequencies, planetary defense arrays activating without coordinated command. Daniel braced himself against the fractured crystal floor as the palace trembled. The sky above Chromos split again with violent energy veins, towers flickering in cascading failure. Outer rim sectors destabilizing, Kaylor transmitted, voice strained. Fleet mobilizations increasing, autonomous defense systems misfiring. Without Liriana's stabilized resonance, emotional amplification spread unchecked. Fear multiplied. Aggression escalated. Inside her containment lattice, Liriana fought to reassert control. Her glow flared white-hot. But each surge only drained her further as dampeners redirected the output into chaos. Daniel felt the aftershock physically, his own nervous system destabilizing without the shared rhythm. The sudden absence left a hollow silence inside his chest, as if gravity itself had shifted. He watched a feed from Sector 9 collapse into open combat. The surge had given them hope. The separation gave them war, and this time, the collapse was accelerating. Emergency lighting failed in sequence, plunging the chamber into fractured darkness. Only Liriana's containment lattice cast intermittent flashes, each pulse weaker than the last. Daniel moved toward a secondary control console, but the interface rejected him. Access privileges revoked. Harmonic grid under military lockdown. Then the atmosphere shifted. Ventilation ports sealed with metallic precision. His implant flared red, oxygen saturation falling. They are isolating you. Kaylor's transmission cut in and out. Secondary containment engaged. Daniel scanned the chamber. A narrow maintenance conduit along the lower wall flickered with residual current. If he could reach it, he might bypass the grid's lockdown protocols. His lungs tightened. Each breath tasted thin, metallic. He forced himself low to conserve oxygen, crawling across the crystalline floor as debris vibrated around him. Liriana's glow dimmed further behind the lattice. She sensed his weakening, but could not reach him. The harmonic silence inside his chest grew heavier, without synchronization. The Empire's biofield felt distant, like a heartbeat fading across vacuum. He reached the conduit and pried it open with trembling fingers. Darkness pressed in, for the first time since arrival. Daniel understood true isolation, not political, biological. The maintenance conduit sparked as Daniel forced it open, exposing braided filaments pulsing with residual harmonic current. Oxygen levels dropped further. His implant counted down in silent red numerals. He could reroute enough power to restore airflow, long enough to survive. Or he could use the remaining charge to override the containment lattice, sealing Liriana. Risking total grid collapse, he hesitated only once. Survival instinct pulled one direction. Responsibility pulled the other. Outside the chamber, riot sirens echoed faintly through fractured conduits. Fleet mobilizations escalated in cascading waves. Every second of indecision amplified instability across systems. Daniel pressed his palm against the exposed filaments. The current bit into his skin, sinking briefly with his biofield. He felt the distant tremor of collapsing outer colonies through that thread of energy. I won't be a spectator, he whispered. He redirected the entire reserve into the lattice override channel. The conduit screamed under overload. Air thinned to near vacuum. His vision blurred at the edges. Across the chamber, the containment lattice flickered. Liriana felt it. A new resonance spike cutting through military dampeners. Daniel exhaled the last controlled breath he had. He chose her. He chose the Empire. The override hit the lattice like a blade of white fire. Cracks splintered across the containment shell surrounding Liriana, fracturing its geometric symmetry. Military dampeners shrieked as feedback surged through secured conduits. Daniel collapsed to one knee. Oxygen almost gone. Vision tunneling into a narrow field of light. The maintenance conduit behind him melted under overload, casting molten reflections across the chamber walls. Structural integrity failing. Kaylor's voice fragmented through static. You have seconds. The lattice ruptured. Shards of hardened light burst outward in silent detonation. Liriana fell forward as the siphon effect ceased abruptly. Her glow unstable but free. Daniel forced himself upright, dragging breath into burning lungs as emergency airflow resumed in ragged bursts. The chamber convulsed again, this time from outside. Shockwaves rippled through the palace. Explosive concussions echoed from distant corridors. Riot transmissions flooded every open frequency. They're moving on the capital core, Liriana said, steadying herself despite visible strain. Daniel gripped the fractured console and pulled himself forward. Then we move faster. The harmonic field flickered between them, weak but alive. Escape was not retreat. It was momentum, and the palace was collapsing around them. They emerged from the resonance chamber into corridors, already fractured by unrest. Emergency sirens pulsed through the crystalline halls, their tones distorted by fluctuating harmonic interference. Through transparent panels, Daniel saw the capital in chaos. Hovering transit platforms collided mid-air as navigation grids glitched. Crowds surged across elevated bridges. Defensive drones misfired into empty space as command hierarchies collapsed. Military command has seized partial grid control, Kaylor transmitted breathlessly. General Vorth has declared stabilization authority. Liriana's glow flickered, weakened, but defiant. Each step she took sent faint ripples outward, calming nearby civilians who passed within range. But her energy was limited. She could not shield the entire city alone. An explosion rocked the eastern tower cluster. Shockwaves rattled the corridor. Daniel grabbed Liriana's arm, steadying both of them as debris cascaded down adjacent shafts. They want full collapse, Daniel said. Chaos justifies takeover. They underestimate what collapse truly costs, Liriana replied, voice strained but unwavering. The harmonic link between them trembled, unstable, yet present. Beyond the palace perimeter, armed units advanced toward the central energy core. The riot was no longer spontaneous. It was orchestrated, and the final breach was approaching. The path to the central harmonic core was no longer ceremonial. It was war-torn. Daniel and Liriana moved through fractured corridors, lit by erratic pulses of violet energy. Structural seams glowed white-hot, where counter-harmonic weapons had scorched the crystal architecture. Security drones lay disabled along the walls, their control matrices hijacked by military override codes. Every step forward required navigating debris and collapsing platforms suspended above open void shafts. The core is under partial lockdown, Kaylor warned. External forces attempting manual severance. Daniel increased his pace despite the strain burning in his lungs. The harmonic link between him and Liriana fluttered. Unstable, but strengthening with proximity to the core nexus. They reached the final junction as armed units breached the outer threshold. General Vorth's forces advanced in disciplined formation. Energy dampeners deployed. Liriana did not slow. Her glow intensified in controlled waves, disrupting targeting arrays within several meters. Daniel activated his implant's interference emitter, buying seconds of distortion. Ahead, the central core chamber shimmered, its massive resonant spire flickering between coherence and collapse. They stepped inside. Behind them, the blast doors sealed under emergency authority. This was the last stable node. If it failed, the Empire would fracture beyond repair. The core chamber dwarfed every structure Daniel had seen on Chromos. A colossal spire of living crystal rose from a luminous abyss, fractured with erratic pulses that threatened total cascade failure. Liriana stepped onto the central platform without hesitation. The harmonic field immediately pressed against them like tidal gravity. "Direct convergence," she said, breath tight. "No dampeners, no modulation." Daniel deactivated every safety protocol in his implant. Pain would not be filtered. Feedback would not be softened. They faced one another. No membrane separated them now. When their hands met, the surge detonated. Energy ripped through Daniel's nervous system with brutal clarity. Her exhaustion, her fear, her fierce determination flooding into him as if their circulatory systems had merged. The spire responded instantly, its fractured veins igniting in cascading coherence. Outside the chamber, military dampeners failed under harmonic overload. Riot channels stuttered into silence. Fleet command signals scrambled. Daniel's knees buckled, but he refused to release her. This was no longer stabilization. It was fusion. The Empire's entire biofield converged through them, amplifying beyond any historical threshold. The spire roared alive in blinding resonance, and the wave began to roll outward. The surge did not tear them apart. It rewrote them. Daniel felt the Empire's biofield thread through his nervous system like luminous circuitry. Where once the harmonic grid radiated outward from Liriana alone, it now braided between them, forming dual convergence nodes. The central spire shifted structure in real time. Fractures sealed, veins of crystal reorganized into symmetrical channels designed for shared output. Liriana gasped, not in pain, but revelation. "It is stabilizing without singular dominance," she said through the storm of light. Beyond the chamber walls, military dampeners overloaded and burned out. Fleet command arrays lost synchronization with centralized override codes. Autonomous defense systems recalibrated under the new waveform. On distant worlds, unrest indicators collapsed simultaneously. Emotional amplification subsided as distributed resonance cascaded through secondary bioreceptors across the population. Daniel's implant adapted once more, abandoning previous baselines. His heartbeat synchronized not only with Liriana, but with the Empire itself. This was no temporary patch. It was systemic redesign. The harmonic field no longer depended on hierarchy. It flowed through her, through him, through every receptor willing to align. The old architecture had dissolved. A new one had emerged. The wave reached the command tiers last. General Vorth stood before collapsing tactical projections as every override channel he had seized blinked out in synchronized failure. The harmonic field he had tried to suppress now flowed beyond military dampeners, rendering centralized control obsolete. Archon Kryth's crystalline facets refracted unstable data before settling into silent acceptance. The distributed architecture cannot be isolated, it transmitted. The singular leverage point no longer exists. Across the capital, armed units felt it first as a subtle quieting inside their own neural receptors. Aggression dampened. Fear signals dissolved. The justification for force evaporated in the presence of stable resonance. Inside the core chamber, Daniel and Liriana maintained full convergence as the final counter-harmonic codes burned out across the grid. Command structures built on scarcity and dependency lost relevance within seconds. Vorth's remaining officers lowered their weapons, not from coercion, but from recalibrated perception. The harmonic field now flowed through them as well, dissolving the emotional amplification that had fueled insurrection. The conspirators had not been defeated by violence. They had been rendered unnecessary. Power no longer required guardians of instability. The Empire had shifted beyond their reach, and there was nothing left for them to seize. The silence after convergence felt heavier than the storm. Daniel stood at the edge of the core platform, muscles trembling from sustained synchronization. The colossal spire no longer flickered. It pulsed in calm, measured intervals, no violent arcs, no cascading fractures. Across Chromos, emergency broadcasts shifted from panic to stabilization reports. Fleet mobilizations halted. Autonomous systems returned to cooperative command structures under the distributed harmonic field. Liriana stepped beside him. Luminous patterns, steady but softer now, no longer burning with defensive intensity. The strain that had shadowed her since his arrival had thinned. Kalor's voice reached them clearly for the first time in cycles. Empire-wide unrest indices have fallen below historical averages. Secondary resonance clusters are stabilizing autonomously. Daniel exhaled slowly. The harmonic link between him and Liriana no longer roared. It hummed, present, integrated, survivable. Outside the shattered palace corridors, reconstruction drones activated. Civilian channels reopened with cautious optimism. They had prevented collapse, but prevention carried cost. Daniel felt the permanent alteration in his own nervous system. The resonance was not temporary. He was no longer merely Earth's envoy. He was part of the grid. Reconstruction did not mean return. Days after the convergence, Chromos felt altered in ways statistics could not fully capture. The harmonic field no longer surged from a throne room or spire alone. It pulsed through transit hubs, residential towers, orbital relays, distributed, shared, self-regulating. Daniel walked beside Liriana, along a suspended bridge overlooking the capital's crystalline skyline. Emergency repairs still scarred the architecture, but the sky above held steady coherence. I feel them, Liriana said quietly. Not as pressure, as presence. Secondary bioreceptors across allied species had awakened in subtle degrees. Citizens who once depended entirely on her output now contributed faint stabilizing frequencies of their own. Daniel felt it too, a constant low resonance beneath his heartbeat. It no longer threatened to overwhelm him. It asked for maintenance, awareness, choice. General Vorth had been stripped of command, not by execution, but by irrelevance. Archon Kryth now oversaw systemic recalibration protocols rather than centralized leverage. The Empire had shifted from singular dependence to shared equilibrium. Liriana turned toward him, glow steady and humanly warm. This balance requires partnership, she said. Daniel nodded. Survival had demanded fusion. Peace would demand stewardship. Night settled over Chromos without turbulence. Daniel stood with Liriana atop the highest observation terrace of the restored palace. Below them, the capital no longer flickered with unstable arcs. It breathed in steady intervals, luminous pathways connecting districts in synchronized calm. Orbital relays shimmered like distant constellations, transmitting the distributed harmonic field across sectors, once on the brink of war. No alarms pierced the air. No emergency fleets mobilized. Daniel felt the resonance beneath his heartbeat. No longer invasive, no longer violent. It was integrated, woven into muscle memory and neural rhythm. A permanent echo of the choice he had made. Liriana's glow reflected softly against the crystalline balustrade. She did not radiate dominance now. She radiated alignment. Trillions sleep without fear tonight, she said. Daniel looked across the skyline, aware of the cost hidden beneath the calm. He could never fully detach from the grid. Earth would never see him unchanged. But collapse had been avoided, and evolution had been chosen over control. Two figures stood above Chromos, no longer sovereign and envoy, partners in a system rebuilt through risk. The Empire endured because they had dared to change it. In the end, the Empire did not survive because of dominance or force. It survived because two beings chose transformation over fear. Daniel sacrificed his old identity to forge a new balance, proving that survival is not merely endurance, but evolution. This story reminds us that when pushed to the edge, we reveal who we truly are. If you felt the resonance of this journey, follow the channel and join us for the next cinematic sci-fi survival story waiting beyond the stars.